January 13th, 1953, Moscow. Professor Yakov Rappaport unfolds the latest issue of Pravda. In the list of those the press calls murderers in white coats, he sees his own name. He will be arrested that very evening. What he doesn't yet know is that his colleagues, the brightest minds of Soviet cardiology, have already been locked up in the basements of Lefortovo prison for months. We're opening this archive not to make grand political statements. We're reconstructing these events to understand how a professional disagreement at a patient's bedside turned into a death sentence for an entire generation of Soviet doctors. This story changed the very fabric of the Soviet investigative system. Today, you'll see why a medical misdiagnosis by top academics became a charge of global conspiracy, how an ordinary cardiologist named Sophia Karpai derailed the prosecution's plans through sheer silence, and what cruel irony left the man who orchestrated this entire ordeal without medical help in his final hours. If you want more documentary investigations like this to keep coming out uncensored, hit the like button on this video. It's the only way to make sure this piece reaches viewers who actually think. This whole story didn't begin in '53. It started 4 years earlier, in a quiet office of the Kremlin hospital. On the paper strip of a cardiograph, a device that records the heart's electrical impulses, a few black, jagged lines appeared. They would lead straight to catastrophe. In the late 40s, Soviet medicine was completely hostage to the political climate. The Kremlin's therapeutic sanitary administration, which served the party elite, operated in an atmosphere of absolute secrecy and relentless pressure. Every high-ranking patient was treated by the state as a strategic asset. Doctors knew the price of a mistake. In 1948, academician Vladimir Vinogradov and his colleagues were effectively staking their lives on the health of aging Politburo members. The death of any one of them automatically triggered suspicion from state security. Scientific prestige offered no protection, quite the opposite. It made professors perfect targets for sabotage charges. The system demanded that medicine achieve total control over the biological aging of the country's leaders, which was physically impossible. It was in this environment that the medical community became dangerously exposed to the secret services. Any discrepancy in diagnoses could set off the punitive machine, which was just waiting for a formal excuse. And that excuse surfaced while treating one of the party's key ideologues. On August 29, 1948, cardiologist Lydia Timoshuk examined the heart of Politburo member Andrei Zhdanov, who was undergoing treatment at a Valdai estate. On the paper strip, she clearly saw signs of a myocardial infarction, the death of a section of the heart muscle caused by a sudden blockage of blood flow. Timoshuk recorded the diagnosis in the medical chart. However, academicians Vladimir Vinogradov and Pyotr Yegorov categorically rejected her findings. The medical luminaries trusted their own clinical experience of auscultation, dismissing the readings of the new electrocardiograph as instrument error. They diagnosed a functional disorder. Zhdanov was prescribed walks in the park instead of strict bed rest. On August 31st, Zhdanov died. The autopsy confirmed Timoshuk was right. The cause of death was a massive myocardial infarction. Fearing for their positions, academicians Yegorov and Vinogradov concealed the results of the post-mortem examination and insisted on destroying the cardiologist's original report. Timoshuk refused to stay silent. She sent a detailed statement to the state security authorities, laying out the conflict of diagnoses and the academician's actions in full. But instead of immediate arrests, there was only silence. The document Lydia Timoshuk had drafted was filed away in the archives of the Ministry of State Security, where it sat forgotten for 4 years. Back in 1948, the security services saw no crime in a medical disagreement. That changed in the summer of 1951. Senior MGB investigator Mikhail Ryumin was facing disciplinary action for negligence. To save his career, he decided to write a personal letter to Joseph Stalin. In it, Ryumin claimed that state security leadership was deliberately covering up the sabotage activities of doctors who were supposedly systematically killing off Soviet officials. As his key piece of evidence, the investigator pulled Timoshuk's old statement about Zhdanov's treatment out of the archives. For Stalin, plagued by worsening hypertension and deep paranoia, the story rang true. Ryumin was given carte blanche. An ordinary medical error was officially declared an act of terrorism. Semyon Ignatiev was appointed the new Minister of State Security with explicit orders. Begin isolating doctors immediately. In late 1952, they came for the Kremlin physicians. The arrested doctors were hauled into the MGB's internal prison, then moved to Lefortovo. In March of 1953, conditions took a brutal turn. 70-year-old academician Vladimir Vinogradov was put in heavy iron shackles. The elderly physician was demanded to confess he was a foreign intelligence agent and admit he'd been practicing sabotage medicine all along. Vinogradov couldn't take the systematic physical abuse anymore. He signed the statement. But the investigation still needed to connect the medical equipment readings to deliberate harm. For that, they needed the signature of Sophia Karpai, the head of the electrocardiography room. She was accused of deliberately faking Zhdanov's cardiograms. Karpai was subjected to a conveyor belt interrogation, endless questioning by a rotating team of investigators. They kept her awake for 7 days straight. That's 168 hours of non-stop pressure. In that time, a train could cross the distance from Moscow to Irkutsk. Karpai was hovering on the edge of total physical collapse. Yet she still refused to sign the false protocols. Her silence threw the investigation into chaos. The case kept getting delayed, stuck long before it could reach the courtroom. Meanwhile, panic was boiling over inside the hospitals. Patients en masse were refusing their medicine, convinced the doctors were trying to poison them. The bond between doctor and patient shattered by the will of the state. So who do you think carries the bigger responsibility in this story? Cardiologist Lydia Timoshuk, whose official letter was used as a weapon by the Secret Services? Or the academicians who, blinded by professional arrogance, brushed off the cardiograph readings entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. While the public hunted for poison inside medicine bottles, behind the closed doors of Stalin's near dacha in Kuntsevo, the final scene of this whole story was unfolding. On March 1, 1953, Joseph Stalin suffered a stroke at the near dacha. The Soviet leader lay on the floor of his study for hours, completely alone, completely helpless. The guards were too terrified to step inside without permission. And once the paralyzed leader was finally found, nobody was rushing to summon the doctors. Stalin's personal physician, academician Vinogradov, was locked in a cell. The medical luminaries who could have organized proper care were rotting in the basements of Lefortovo. When the new doctors finally arrived at the dacha, they were in shock. Their hands were trembling, terrified they'd be the next ones arrested. The window for effective treatment had already closed. On March 5, 1953, Stalin was dead. With his death, the political order behind the doctor's case lost all meaning. Karpai's steadfast silence had saved dozens of lives. If she'd signed those confessions, the show trial would have happened in February. The accused would have been executed before power ever changed hands. On March 13th, the interrogations in Lefortovo came to a halt. The shackles were removed. The prisoners were moved to better rations. The system was quietly preparing to admit it had made a terrible mistake. On April 3, 1953, the Presidium of the CPSU Central Committee issued a resolution on the full rehabilitation of those who had been arrested. The next day, Pravda published an official statement declaring the doctors innocent. For the first time, Soviet citizens learned that state security agencies had used unacceptable methods of investigation. Lydia Timoshuk was forced to return the Order of Lenin she had previously been awarded. Former Deputy Minister of State Security Mikhail Ryumin found himself under investigation. In July 1954, he was executed by court order. On April 4, 1953, Minister of Internal Affairs Lavrenti Beria signed a secret decree. This document banned the use of physical coercion against all those under investigation in the Soviet Union. The ban was a crucial step toward the beginning of the era of the thaw. Professor Yakov Rapoport returned to his apartment on Pokrovsky Boulevard. He lived a long life. His memoirs preserve the whole truth about his days spent in Lefortovo. In the next episode, we'll look at the story of Professor Sergei Bryukhanenko and his experiments on reviving organisms with the world's first artificial blood circulation device. Subscribe so you don't miss this chapter. The Doctor's plot showed the fragility of human life in the face of political will. It changed the rules of Soviet criminal investigation. Sometimes, for the system to keep moving forward, it has to admit its mistakes to the living.